Well, good morning and welcome to the latest in my series of In Conversation pieces. And I've got a first for you this morning. John Ellis here from the Canal River Trust is the first non-angler, I say non-angler that he doesn't fish anymore. He used to fish quite a lot, regular angler when he was younger. But he's the first non-angler I've had on the channel. And the reason I've invited him on here is I've been super impressed with the work that John's done when it comes to getting more youngsters in the sport. I'd go as far as to say John has done more than anybody I know in the UK to push the cause of junior angling and getting kids into fishing. But I don't want to start with that, John. I want to start with your history, because to have a passion for angling like you've got, it's obviously in there somewhere.
It's certainly in the DNA. I was so fortunate, Tom. I was a farmer's son, born on a farm up on the Shropshire-Welsh border, and as luck would have it, there was a pond full of crucian carp, and they were tiny little stunted crucian carp, and so many farms had those. And of course, off you went in the evening with your dad after he'd milked the cows, and you go and catch a few crucians. Second piece of good fortune is my granny and my great uncle Bill lived in the next village, Grinley Brook, and the Llangollen Canal flows through there. And so certainly before I was 6, I was a regular visitor to the Llangollen Canal. And we were, again, lucky, it was full of gudgeon, so I could catch gudgeon to my heart's content because they're a nice, easy species. And I was hooked from there on. I think I fished my first match in 1970 when I was 7. And even more luckily, I managed to get a snare of 10-ounce perch, and with a couple of bits, I think I weighed in 13 ounces, and I won the match.
No, 13 ounces?
With 13 ounces. And that's how fishing was then. And, one of my gripes about modern anglers is, I've only had 50 or 60 pound. Well, 2 or 3 pound would win the adult matches, and ounces would win the junior matches back in the day. And we didn't complain because that's how it was. And so, won my first match. Didn't win any more for a while. I was just lucky. But I had my dad. I wouldn't say he was a brilliant angler, because he didn't really have the time being a farmer. He had to milk the cows and feed the pigs before we could get off to a match, and we were often last there and that sort of thing. But he did know and understand the basics of bait presentation, fine lines, small hooks. So he kitted me out properly with what little money he had, and I think that's why I always caught fish.
Yeah.
And those memories that I always call them the Benny Ashurst principles, because I suspect he sort of got it from Benny's book, which I used to read as often as I could. Those principles always stood me in good stead, and I fished. I was junior champion at the club for 3 or 4 years, then did reasonably well in the seniors, and met some great anglers, partly through work, and started my own or a junior club in the Grinley Brook village, and I got more pleasure out of running the junior club and seeing them succeed than I did in my own fishing.
So almost the link with junior angling, a little bit of a vocation. I mean, how old would you be then when you set that up?
I think I started when I was about 15 in 1978, running matches for kids, and every boy in the village and some of the girls would take part. And by the time we got to the late 80s, early 90s, we were getting like 35 kids. Now that doesn't sound a lot, but in a rural area, where there's 100 cows for every house, it was quite significant. We were getting kids coming 10 or 12 mile, and that's where maybe Motty wasn't from, just one example. He was from Wixall, which has got to be, good 10 mile away, and thoroughly enjoyed that. One of the things I did do is I realised, you reach a stage where you realise that you don't know enough, and to help the kids you've got to take them to the next level. And we joined forces with the White Anglers, who are a big club in Nantwich, and we decided we were going to go in the national junior national, and we'd basically pick a team for 6 from Grinley Brook and 6 from White, and I think it might have ended up 7 and a 5.
Yeah.
You know, and in that first national, which was 1990, it was on the Grand Union, which of course was quite similar to the Shropshire Union, so it was going to suit the lads. We were amazed. You know, they read out the top 10, and in 10th place was White's Anglers. You know, and of course the teams that beat us were, you know, Junior Starlets and your Workshops and your Wakefields. I think Milton Keynes won it. Barnsley were up there, and the fact that we've been able to, you know, give them a run for their money was, yeah, I think that's one of my more proud achievements actually. And 4 years later, or was it 3? Might be 3 years later. It was on the Staffs and Worcester, around Stafford. And they finished runner-up that year, and so I've always, you know, always give Mark Wilton a ribbon, because Mark Wilton, who now works for the Angling Trust, he was the manager of the Isaac Walton Juniors that won that match.
Right.
You know, so I always blame him for costing me the ultimate victory. But so if you're listening, Mark, yeah, I'm never going to forgive you. Yeah, but seriously, obviously you put a brilliant team together that year. And actually, Mark's one of the people that's actually thinking about getting involved in Let's Fish.
Oh, we'll come on to Let's Fish in a minute.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit, John, about your professional life as well. Obviously, working for the Canal River Trust must be, in some respects, a dream job for someone with an interest in angling.
It is an absolutely dream job. I suppose, like any job, it has its bad days.
Yeah.
But I mean, life's like that, isn't it? And so, how do you get into something like fisheries management? And I get asked that a lot, yeah. And it is difficult. And so you've got to be, I think you've got to be good, or reasonably good academically, and you've got to be lucky. And I think by lucky, I think right place at the right time. So my career path was, I was reasonably academic. I mean, my mum always told me off, too much fishing, not enough studying. Yeah, and she'd always got ambitions that I should study medicine at university, and for that, in those days, you needed basically 3 straight A's, and I didn't get 3 straight A's. I managed 2, but I flunked my chemistry a bit. So as luck would have it, I got a place to read biology at Liverpool. And I didn't know until I went for the interview that they had the best freshwater fisheries set up in universities in that era. It's not necessarily true today. I think probably Hull University is probably where you'd go, or Stirling up in Scotland. So I did my degree, dropped in lucky because there was a couple of short-term jobs going at the university. One was looking at the impact of grass carp on weed, and another was age and growth of eels on the Severn, and I managed to get both of those like 6-month contracts, so that gave me more experience. And then I ended up moving to the Great Ouse River Authority or you know, the Anglian water side of it, as a fisheries officer on the fens. And I realised, yeah, and I realised, you know, and then I realised I knew nothing about practical fisheries management. I could name every parasite that, you know, that roach and bream had got, and I knew all about the academic stuff and the Latin names of everything, but I'd got no clue about how to pull a net. You know, and I learnt so much from the guys at Anglian Water, some of whom are still there. Yeah, it's a job that people don't tend to leave once they're in it. And yes, I've surveyed. I must have surveyed every fenland drain and river and the upper Great Ouse, and of course one of the successes in that post is Kai Jerram. You know,
did you take Kai on, did you?
Well, no, Kai's a lot younger than me. I know he doesn't look it, but he is a lot younger than me. And you know,
he was small.
Well, yeah, that's another reason I really like Kai. I think he's the only guy in fisheries that I tower over. You know, I'm a good, you know, bit of a midget myself at about 5'5", but I tower over Kai. So, sorry, Kai, if you're listening, I had to get that one in. And yeah, and again, when an opportunity came to go to, you know, British Waterways, there was loads of applicants, and there was 3 posts, one in the south, one in the north, one in the Midlands, and the one I really wanted was the one in the north, and I applied for it, didn't get it. I was pretty, you know, you're upset at the time. I wanted to go and live back with my parents as well. You know, I thought that would be a good option, but I didn't get that. But I got a phone call saying, you know, we think you've got potential, you know, you're quite young, would you be interested in coming to work for Tom Leatherland in the south? And so I took it, and the rest's history really. Been here for 30 years.
30 years?
30 years, yeah.
I want to ask you about some of the highs and lows of that career then, John, really, because there's a few things that you mentioned to me that I never knew and are quite sort of interesting. I'm not going to put words in your mouth. What have been the highlights of your years working for the Canal River Trust, as it is now?
It's quite a hard one to answer. I mean, I think you'll be able to cut this bit, won't you?
No, I'm not cutting anything.
No, you're not cutting anything. Oh, blimey. I wasn't expecting this question, you see. I think when you really think about it, I was joining an organisation that certainly wasn't pro-angling. And I was quite naive about the way that politics were. Yeah. It was pure boating. Anglers were considered a damn nuisance. Yeah, if they could have got rid of anglers in that era, they probably would. Which is absolute, madness.
Why do you think that was?
A cultural thing. I think that the boating community are very much more politically astute than the angling community. And I think the angling community has got a little bit better in the last few years at positive influence, and so that's been a real battle, that paradigm shift of trying to get fishing and fisheries management, the science behind what we do, accepted as a proper profession within the trust. And there's probably still work to be done, but we've moved a long way. So in terms of the big picture, if I just whiz over here and I'll just, sorry Tom, I'll just take that and I'm just off for a second, because in here, if I can find it, I've actually got, well, you can see that on camera. Yeah, this is the front of the staff magazine. Right. Yeah, it's the February issue. Yeah. And what do you notice?
Fishing is the main picture.
Yes. Now that would never have happened in times gone by. Yeah. And so a cameraman's come to the open day Anderton boat lift, could have taken a picture of anything, and probably did. And the one they've chosen is a fishing one.
And it's got a. Oh, it's not a groove cap; it's a nightcap. Oh.
Yeah.
No, it's
so that's probably been the biggest success. Developed quite a few commercial fisheries. Again, some people say that, well, that's saved angling. Others will say it's ruined it. I can see all points of view on that one. There's certainly been a huge market for the commercials, and I do wonder at times if we hadn't have done that, or I hadn't have done that, whether I would have been talking to you now, because I might not have been, in a job, because they do generate, a good source of income, places like Drayton and Boddington.
I want to talk a little bit about, funnily enough, that Drayton and Boddington, because if I remember rightly from a past conversation, you were instrumental in the stocking of those venues with carp that made them into the super waters that they are now.
Yes, only the ones in the south, not like Earlswood, or I never had any involvement in makings. That was in Keith Fisher's patch. But the ones in the south, Clattercut, Boddington, Drayton, yes, those were all mine. Drayton was the first one.
Well, so just talk me through the thought process that made you want to stock them full of carp. Why you did it?
Well, thinking back, we were always under pressure from managers to generate more income, and I just didn't see there was a way to do that on the canal network, because if you put rents up too high, clubs would simply say, well, no thank you, Mr. Ellis, we're no longer interested in being a customer of British Waterways, and that was the reality. So we couldn't put you know, you can't keep putting rents up because clubs walk away, you know. So we had to think about alternatives, and these are big water bodies, and they were full of, you know, silverfish, roach and things, but generated hardly any income, you know, from memory, and you don't quote me exactly, but Drayton's probably angling income was like 800 quid a year or something like that, you know. By putting carp in and investing in, you know, platforms, we were able to, you know, quickly turn that into like 20 or 30,000 pounds a year, you know, which is obviously significantly different. And again, I was quite lucky. It was probably, the timing was right. It was quite early. It was, I don't know, 93 or 94, somewhere around there. So there wasn't a huge amount of competition, and anglers flocked, particularly from anywhere else except for Daventry. You know, the locals said, well, you've ruined it. Yeah, but people came in their droves from Leicester and Birmingham. Sheffield was Sheffield's local water. Yeah. You know, I'm not exaggerating. And that was what, 90 mile away or 80 mile away, you know, and then and anglers in those days would say, well, it's only an hour and a half, an hour and 40. It's local. You know, we used to go to the Fens in the 60s or the Witham, and the anglers travelled great distances, and that's one of the things I think that seems to have changed up to a point, doesn't it? There's not as many anglers want to travel so far, and I'm not necessarily convinced that travel's that much more expensive now than it was 30 years ago. No, not really.
But I mean, a shining success, really. One, you know, a trendsetter in many ways. What you did with Drayton. One question I've always wondered. It obviously worked so well. I mean, you had all the match fishing as a project doing Drayton. You had all the match fishing income off it for them first few years, and then I think it was about 10 years ago they stopped match fishing on there, didn't they?
Virtually, because the fish are, you know, too. But you can still book a match on there, but it's, you know,
not keep nets. I don't think
you can't. No,
it's now lined with specimen anglers.
Yeah, exactly.
So you've had the match fishing income for years, the specimen fishing income for years. Why is that model not repeated? Why have you not done it again and again with smaller, you know, get a reservoir, fill it full of carp and enjoy it for 30 years?
Well, that's an interesting question. A lot of our sites are sites of special scientific interest. Right, okay. So it's, even if you wanted to, you wouldn't get permission to stock with carp. So obviously you can't do it for those reasons. Others of our reservoirs, because they are first and foremost water supply reservoirs, we must never forget that. You know, if they're going to be very low, in the summer, which again, Boddington at times can be, you know, I have sleepless nights once the water level goes about below 2 metres, you know, praying for rain. There's not that many more suitable sites out there.
So obviously if they lose the water, you worry about the oxygen for the stock, etc.
Exactly, and you need a balance. I don't think it'd be right to have all of our reservoirs just carp and then none that are, you know, that are traditional sort of roach and bream and those sorts of fisheries. So, you know, have we got the balance quite right? Well, it's hard to say really, isn't it? But I guess you could, you know, if you did them all, you'd flood the market as well.
That's true.
Yeah. So yeah, we've you know, interesting history.
Definitely.
And it's changed fishing, hasn't it?
Absolutely, a massive change. Well, sounds like you've had a fascinating career. And it's by no means over yet. You've still got the old dog, isn't it? You know what I mean?
Yes. Somebody called me a veteran the other day. And, you know, not quite sure whether to take it as a compliment or consult with my lawyers, but I guess I am getting to that stage. And of course, there's only one thing worse than being a veteran, and that's not being a veteran, isn't
that's
it?
True. It's, put it like that. Yeah. I want to talk now back onto the coaching subject, really, because we met for the first time about 6-7 years ago when I worked for the magazine, and we were talking about Canal River Trust business that day. But then the second time we met, we were looking at basically the work that you do through the Canal River Trust to get more kids into fishing. Just talk to me about your route into that, and obviously then I want to focus on the great work that you're doing. So just tell us how it all started.
Well, it all started in about, well, once we became a charitable trust. Before that, there was no real interest in it at all. Yeah, and that was, I could see that numbers were declining on our waterways. And people say, well, what are you going to do about it, John? And that's very easy, but when you're not in a position of political influence, your hands are tied, really. Yeah. But once we became a trust, there was a realisation amongst directors and trustees that we had to embrace all customers, all users. And what was quite interesting, we appointed an angling development manager, who I think you met actually, a girl called Becca Dent.
Yes, yeah.
And Becca did that role for 2 years, and she had quite an influence in ways which weren't obviously, apparent. But it was very interesting having a young person with a whole different mindset, sort of trying to sell angling internally.
And a young woman as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, in many ways the polar opposites of me.
Demographic,
Yeah, totally different. And I suppose they were thinking, what's this young girl doing? What is this angling thing? John Ellis has been banging on and we've never really listened. And I think they listened to Becca much more than they listened to me, And so I think between us we made quite an interesting team in that respect, in that I'd got obviously the sort of background knowledge, but Becca had got the marketing ability.
Yes.
And not long before she got promoted, we were asked to look at doing a fishing campaign. And I won't go into the details, I'll just say where it's ended up. Well, 2 years ago it ended up with us starting a serious Let's Fish initiative.
And this is a fishing campaign, a recruitment
campaign to get new people into the sport. And it's turned out that even though we invite people from 4 to 104, the majority of people who come and try fishing for the first time are young people between the ages of about 4 and 15. We get a few older lapsed. Usually the lapsed people are guys. They maybe got to their late 50s, paid the mortgage off, or they've retired and they want to get back into it, but they ain't been since they're teenagers. And often they just want to talk to a coach for an hour and see what kit they need to buy. Whereas the youngsters, they've never fished before, and they're from families that have never fished before. 34% of them are girls, which I find fascinating. Significant proportions are from the ethnic minorities. So I don't think there's a real barrier. It's not people say, the ethnic minorities will never fish because of X, Y and Z. We haven't found that to be true. They've just never sort of had the opportunity before because nobody in the community goes fishing. And we've in the last 2 years, it's gone from strength to strength, and clubs are coming on board steadily as they see what we're doing.
Give us some stats then, John. Tell us how many. Last year I did a little bit of work with you, as you know, but to say it only started 2 years ago.
In earnest. We did a small number of events before that, but we started serious. We did 147 events in 2018, and last year we did 320.
Nearly one a day.
Nearly one a day. Yeah, obviously they're from Easter through to the end of October, with a big focus in the school holidays and half terms, because that's the peak period. 8,500 actual people, 8,500 total visits, and that's about 5,000 different individuals.
And just talk to me about retention, because I know you're a statistician, if I can even say it.
Something like that.
So it's all very well getting these kids there, showing them fishing, But the thing I found impressive was quite a few of them came back, and quite a few of them have taken it on to the next stage and fished some of the competitions that you run.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a great believer in that you've got to do things with a reasonable level of quality. Canal River Trust have 5 values, and one of them is excellence. Yeah. And if you can't achieve excellence, it wants to be as good as it can be. And by coming to angling development relatively late, that's been an advantage, because I've been able to have a look at other models and tried to work out why they haven't worked. And I'm not knocking individuals or groups, but the statistics of rod licence sales and junior memberships showed that previous initiatives, although they've been really well intentioned, haven't produced many anglers. I don't think anybody would really deny that, because the data shows that. So I thought, well, what do we need to do differently to make sure that those that really want to take it up end up doing so? So our model is around let's make the first session as good as it can be. So to do that, you've got to have a decent front of house experience, so the mums or the granddads or whatever have got confidence that you're professional. So you've got to look the part. You've got your gazebo, your coaches have got to be dressed properly, and then your coaches have got to be competent, and they've got to be competent in 2 aspects really. They've got to be able to communicate get rapport with pupils. There's a lot of coaches out there who want to show everybody how good a fisherman they are. Well, it's not about that. It's about catching that pupil that comes along, that participant. It's about helping them catch their first fish. And you can't do that if you haven't got any practical angling skills either, or practical angling skills for a canal. And so we've invested a lot of time in a process called modification, which is we've actually got another modification coach now up in Yorkshire, Pete Dawson, who's a big mate of Dennis White's. And what that's about is basically upskilling the existing coaches so they can make the best out of a peg. Because it's easy to catch fish on a canal for the first hour, but it's very difficult to keep it going for 5 or 6. And so we're focusing on making sure that the coaches
can catch fish.
The coaches can catch fish, they can teach, they can inspire. The mums or dads or the pupils know when the next opportunity is. Come back again. We're actually doing some filming soon about starter kits. Really important, I think, that people, if they decide they want to take it up, go out and buy kit that's fit for purpose. Because so often we get people coming to Let's Fish events, coming back 3 months later and said, we had a wonderful first time, went to the shop, my lad's been 8 times, not had a bite, what are we doing wrong? And Dennis Hunt, just the other week, had exactly that. And he said, well, come and show me what you've bought. He says, well, it's in the car. So mum goes, and it's got a size 12 hook on it, and a massive great lighthouse of a float, and the main line too thick. And Dennis said, well, there's not much I can do, but I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll put a size 22 to an 08 bottom, and let's see if that makes any difference. Within 90 seconds, the kid had caught a fish. And he hadn't caught a fish for hours. And it can often be something as simple as that, Tom. And so it's thinking about the little things that make a big difference.
Absolutely. There's a lot to it.
There is. There's a lot to this, and it can't be done without clubs. It's whilst I suppose in many ways I tried to provide leadership for this, and so does Pete Henry. At the heart of it are the hard-working coaches at clubs, because there's a lot starting to go on in the evenings and weekends and not tie-in sessions, and without that, and I could quote you dozens of names if I thought of. I just give you like Eric Brown, Andy Fairclough, Dennis Hunt. There's just 3, but there's 60 or 80 really dedicated, effectively volunteers out there who are working at grassroots to develop the skills of those youngsters. And I like competition. You know, I think that not all children enjoy competition, but a lot of kids like friendly competition. And the idea of the Junior Canal Championships is to get those that, you know, that want to.
I've got a flair for it, maybe.
Yeah, you know, and have that competitive element. Yeah, to have a go and experience it. And if they come and they don't like it, it's not for them or what they lost a day. You know, but I do think most kids are quite competitive. You see it with siblings, don't you? You say, who's going to catch the most fish today, you or your sister?
Yeah,
you know.
too right. And I love that. That to me, I think I've said this to you before. That gets right into the competitive thing, and it will get more anglers. There was a big movement, I think, in the 90s or early 2000s when I was growing up, and it was against competition in schools, and we shouldn't have it. But I think couldn't agree more. I think that sort of thing, pitting brother against brother. I mean, my brother's about 5 years younger than me. And growing up, we were always like that. It was sort of, you know, who can do this, who can do that. And it gets right to the heart of what kids want to do, doesn't it?
I think, yes. I mean, so, you know, not everybody, but I think the majority. There's not many kids who say, oh, you know, doesn't matter who catches the most.
Yeah.
You know, I don't think I've ever had that answer.
No.
And I think that, you know, children do like to learn. Yeah, particularly if they don't realise they're learning. If you say, well, you're having a fishing lesson and you're going into a classroom today, that'll probably put them off. But if they're learning whilst they're having fun and they're getting better at something, then they're going to hopefully stick with it.
Absolutely.
You know, and once you've got them hooked in that way, in a positive way, where they're learning and developing their skills and their patience and their concentration, and often mums will say, can't believe he sat there or she sat there, you know, for 40 minutes and like hasn't wandered off. What have you been able to do? It's magic, you know.
That's the power of fishing.
It's the power of fishing, and I think sometimes we forget, you know, that there's a lot of good that we can do for people's health and well-being, if only as an industry we tap into it.
Absolutely.
You know, and that's a challenge, because everybody's got their own idea of what the model should be. Yeah, and they want to reinvent the wheel or do it their way, you know. And some people have said, well, in fact, one coach, I'll give you a great example of how I think you shouldn't do it. His lad got to his 7th birthday, and he said, right, I've never taken you fishing before, and so he's a good angler, he's a match angler. Took him to a commercial, and he had, I don't know, 35 carp for £100. And the lad enjoyed it. 2 weeks later they went again, stayed a bit longer. This time they caught like £150 a carp. The next time the lad didn't want to go. He said, it's boring. He said, it's the same fish. Don't want to go, Dad. And I think there's a lesson there in that I think, and I could be wrong, but this is what I think, that fishing is a ladder. It's a series of rungs to climb. Yeah, and you start off at the bottom, yeah, with your little fish, your perch, your gudgeon, and your roach and your rudd. And luckily, most canals have got plenty of those in. And kids of 6, 7, 8, 9, you know, they don't know that those fish are not cool anymore. They like we are. Yeah. Oh wow, you know, caught, and they look at the stripes of a perch, and it's a great coaching thing as well, because the coaches can do so much with the biology, you know, a basic level. Well, these are the gills, this is his mouth, and one thing and another, and that journey. Well, you know, you caught 3 fish this week. Why don't you come back again, see if you can catch 5? Yeah. Take them on that journey, and so if you want to become a carp angler, you want to become a pike angler, yeah, start off at the bottom, and those are the end goals. It's not where you start off. No, it's where your destination in fishing might be, yeah, once you've had a bit of an apprenticeship.
It's sowing the seed as well, and I think that's so important, what you said there, right? If you can make it seem appealing, and I think some of it is possibly in you to start with. Like I've took people fishing before, and some of them have turned into lifelong anglers. I've took people fishing. My cousin always springs to mind, bless him. I took him, and his first fish were a crucian, about a pound, which was lovely fish.
Yeah.
But I've got one. Oh, look, crucian. No, you just tell he didn't want it. He didn't enjoy it.
Yes.
I suppose you get that as well, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. Not, anybody says, 100% of people are going to take up fishing. Well, no, it's not going to work like that. It's about presenting that opportunity and presenting it well, so that those who really want to will run with it. And that can be people that are perhaps not so good at other sports. They've tried other sports at school, and maybe they don't like the physicality of, I don't know, rugby or whatever, and they find that it's for them. And we're competing against dozens of other sports, aren't we? A lot of which are televised, and we're in a competitive market, and we have to offer a good first opportunity. Some will, some won't. If we could recruit 1 in 5 or 1 in 6 of people who came to our event, and you turn them into a lifelong angler, they're going to spend a lot of money with the trade over the years.
Absolutely.
And hopefully buy a few season permits for the angling clubs that rent water. Which will keep me in a job for another few years. I mean, we have to.
Well, you'll need a few more years.
Well, at my age, at my age, yes. I mean, the trouble is, when you get to my age, they keep putting the pension age up.
Oh yeah.
I think it was 65, then it's 66, and now it's currently 67, and I know it'll be 68 or 69, won't it, by the time that I retire? So you youngsters, you'll never retire, Tom.
Well, it doesn't sound like it, does it?
Doesn't sound like it, no.
I'm a big fan of your Canal River Trust Angling Facebook page. And one of the things I've noticed on there, and I know who's behind it, I know it's you who writes most of the posts, or is the brains behind most of the posts. You're a lover of angling history, I'd say. More so than anybody I know, actually. You're interested in the national championships, the history of canal fishing, it's a real sort of passion for you, and I think that comes across not only in what I see on the page, but also it's a big reason why the page is so successful. It's grown really well. So I just want to talk a little bit about that, really. What sort of gave you the interest in that side of things?
I've always been reasonably interested in history, and I think you have to know where you're going, you have to know where you've come from. Yeah. So I think there is an element of truth, in that expression. I suppose even as a kid, I always liked talking to the older anglers. I was fascinated. They used to tell me they used to travel by train, and I remember meeting a guy called Charlie Caulfield, who was a good angler from the Wichita area, and every year he tried to qualify to fish for Shropshire in the national. And one year he made it. It was either 46 or 47. Yeah. And it was like the highlight of his life to be good enough to fish for Shropshire. And that intrigued me. And they couldn't afford hotels. And he slept out on the banks of the river with them, because the 46 and the 47 national, I think, were on the Witham. So it was one of those two. And I thought, wow, to be good enough to fish for Shropshire. What would that? And of course I wasn't. Me and my dad actually tried a couple of times and fished a couple of the trial matches, and he realised there was a level, above you, and then actually when you looked at Shropshire's result, you realised there was levels above them, and so that fascinated me. And to me, it's more about the people. I've never been so interested in the old tackle, as like John Essex is fascinated by the people. And the old tackle. I've never been a collector of old tackle, although my fishing tackle these days is pretty old. My Abu 506Ms are still sitting there, and I still think they're the best reel. But I like the people stories. And then a few years ago, I got talking to John Essex from the Likely Lads, and John said, I'm writing a book. And I said, well, how long have you been writing it then, John? And he said, about 10 years I've been researching it, and that was 15 years ago. And he started showing me photographs of, old anglers from times gone by, and that just fascinated me. And I started looking out in the old files at works for old angling agreements. Where did it all start? Who were these early anglers? And over the years, I've found out some things from talking to people, like the first match I can find. It's got to be grateful to Frank Lithgow at Warrington, because they've got a poster 1843, Warrington anglers versus Hume anglers. And old angling agreements, Northampton Nen were renting fishing on the Grand Union in the 1850s. And I've got an agreement with the Great Western Railway Company in Newbury from about 1875. And some of the fascinating correspondence that's in the old files that, luckily I've still got a few. The war years, letters from clubs in the East End wanting rent reductions because, a lot of the people have been bombed out. They've lost all their tackle. First World War rent reductions, things like that. Real sort of sad stuff.
Yeah.
And a lot of it's been lost, but at least we've kept some of it. And I suppose Britain is a country which keeps its history and heritage. Mm-hmm. So if I can play a little role in that, and I do, I keep John Essex on his toes because to me he is fantastic, and I will plug his book, because somebody that spends 25 years researching the National, and I think when he started off he thought it'd be quite easy, get all the results, do some stats, and of course it's turned into a lifelong obsession for John. He's got hundreds of medals, going right back to like the 1907 National. I think he's got a medal from that, and a lot of those will be lost.
Yeah.
So I love that, and I always love the debates about who's the greatest angler, just as I do in any other sport. I'm like cricket and football. I'm always looking back. Well, was Best a better player than Cantona, or was Ian Botham, who was better, Ian Botham or Ben Stokes, or was it Andrew Flintoff? And I love those debates because they're great trivial fun, aren't they? Because you just you don't know. They were all greats in their era, weren't they?
Well, I'm going to. I always end these debates with a controversial question, as you know, something that makes people twitch a bit,
Yeah.
It's all part of the fun. So, I've got one for you, which I want to end this interview on, actually, and it's along the lines you've just described.
I've dropped myself in it here then.
So, we're on about canal anglers and great canal anglers. I want you to imagine a situation where there is a match on a canal, random canal. We're drawing out for the canal it's going to be on. It could be any of the canals in the UK.
Yeah, narrow or wide.
Yeah. They're all going to be. One's going to be drawn out, right?
Yeah.
And then you're going to have to put an angler up to fish for your life on that canal. I'm going to put Matt Godfrey up. He's fishing for my life. Whoever wins goes off to the guillotine, and whoever loses goes to the guillotine. Whoever wins enjoys a, lavish life of luxury after.
Yeah. Can I have a couple of weeks to think about it? No, I didn't think I would.
Matt Godfrey in the Tom Scholey corner.
So Matt,
who are you going to choose?
Right. Well, let's be logical about this. There's far more narrow boated canals than there are deep wide ones.
Right.
So statistically, you're going to pull out a narrow boated canal. Yeah. If you don't, I might be in trouble. Yeah. So I've got to think about who would I have in my. Think of because of time, my short list is only going to be 2, and it's either Jason Cunningham or Simon Mottram. I could have gone Danny Martin, Graham Smith, and Simon Priest. If I was going to pick a team of 5, or even Alan Donald, but I must I?
One angler.
Oh, Jason or Motti. Oh, that's a tough call. Matt Godfrey. Yeah, Matt's an attacking angler, isn't he?
Yeah. It can be very negative as well.
Can it be
Always a sly dog.
Yeah, you just don't know, do you? You don't know what. If it fished hard, I'd choose Motti.
Yeah.
If it fished more of a bagging up style, I'd choose Jason.
See, you've been knocking about with politicians too long.
I have, yes.
Answer.
One answer, Jason then. Jason it is, yes, just.
Jason v Matt, that'd be a battle, wouldn't it?
It would, yes. Yeah, and if I tell you, I'd love to see it actually. Yeah, I'd love to see them on something like the Shropshire Union Canal.
It'd be great, wouldn't it?
On even pegs, yeah. And I'd take Jason to win.
Well, there we are. John, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
And you too, Tom.
I'm sure we'll be seeing a lot more of you through the year.
Yeah.